Welcome. Let's talk about something that matters more than most people realize, knowing whether you're actually on track with your retirement savings. Not some generic rule of thumb, but a real benchmark tied to how you actually invest your money. The answer involves two different frameworks that approach this question from completely different angles. The first framework, how you invest, actually matters. There's a retirement savings guide that most people have never encountered. It starts by asking a fundamental question. If you're aggressive with your investments versus cautious, does that change how much you need to have saved right now? The answer is absolutely yes, and here's why. This framework is built on specific portfolio structures. An aggressive investor might hold 80% stocks and 20% bonds during their working years, then shift to 65 stocks and 35 bonds in retirement. A moderate investor runs 65 stocks and 35 bonds while working, then moves to a 50-50 split. A conservative investor starts with 50% stocks and 50% bonds, then becomes even more conservative at 35 stocks and 65 bonds after retiring. Here's what matters. Depending on how you're positioned, your required savings target changes dramatically. Let me be clear about something important. These three categories are frameworks, not personality types. Your approach might shift as you age. You might be comfortable taking risk at 35, but prefer stability at 55. That's normal and healthy. What matters is understanding two distinct concepts: risk tolerance, which is how you emotionally feel about market swings, and risk capacity, which is how much volatility your actual financial situation can handle. They're related but different. Now, here's what this framework shows us. Early in your career, the gap between investor types is small, but as you near retirement, that gap widens significantly. Why? Because when you're 25, compounding still has 35 years to work for you. Your starting balance can be modest because time does heavy lifting. But at 55, with only a decade until retirement, you can't rely on future growth to close gaps. Your required balance depends much more on what you already have and how you're positioned. Think of it this way. An aggressive investor at age 35 might only need to have accumulated the equivalent of half a year's income because they're betting on strong returns ahead. A conservative investor at the same age might need 2.5 times their income because they're not counting on aggressive growth. Same age, same goal, completely different starting points. This is the real trade-off. Take more risk and you can get away with less accumulated capital. Take less risk and you need more money already in place. There's genuinely no free option here. Let's use a concrete example. Suppose your household brings in $75,000 annually. An aggressive investor at 30 years from retirement might only need $36,000 set aside. At 20 years out, maybe $190,000. By 10 years before retirement, we're talking $350,000. You're relying on that portfolio doing substantial work. The same household as a conservative investor, 30 years out, you'd need $130,000. That's nearly 4 times more. At 20 years out, you're looking at nearly $300,000. By 10 years before retirement, you'd want $550,000 accumulated. The conservative approach requires significantly more upfront capital but provides cushion against market turbulence. The second framework, age-based milestones. Now let's look at a completely different approach. This one ignores your specific portfolio mix and focuses on age-based targets. It's simpler, more memorable, and widely used. The guideline goes like this. By age 30, aim for 1 times your annual income. By 40, 3 times. By 50, 6 times. By 60, 8 times. And when you're ready to stop working around 67, 10 times your annual income. Using our $75,000 household example, that means $75,000 by 30, $225,000 by 40, $450,000 by 50, $600,000 by 60, and $750,000 by retirement. This framework also accounts for different retirement ages. Retire at 62, you'd need 14 times your income because your retirement spans more years, and Social Security replaces less of your spending. Retire at 70, you only need 8 times because your working years extended and Social Security replaces more of your spending. Behind these numbers are specific assumptions.
You start investing at 25, you maintain a consistent 15% savings rate, including employer contributions, you have meaningful stock exposure throughout your working life, you retire around 67. Social Security eventually replaces approximately 45% of your income, and your portfolio can safely sustain a 4.5% annual withdrawal rate. Change any of those variables and your number shifts accordingly. Comparing them side by side, here's what jumps out when you put these frameworks next to each other.
First, in the early years, the age-based approach recommends substantially more than the aggressive investor approach. At age 35, the age-based framework suggests $150,000. The aggressive investor approach only suggests $36,000. That's a massive difference. One strategy is saying get serious capital in place early. The other is saying time will compound your returns so you can start smaller. Second, the age-based framework actually aligns closely with the conservative investor approach in early years. You'd think an age-based guide would sit near the aggressive end, but it doesn't. It runs closer to conservative, which surprises many people. Third, by the time you reach retirement, the picture flips. The age-based target of $750,000 falls between the aggressive and moderate investor approaches, well below the conservative benchmark. Why? The age-based framework assumes Social Security will offset a meaningful portion of spending. The investor-type framework doesn't necessarily make that assumption. Fourth, they're answering slightly different questions. The investor-type framework asks, given my portfolio mix, how much should I have accumulated right now? It's a real-time checkpoint. The age-based framework asks, what cumulative total should I reach by specific life milestones? It's more of a roadmap. Why both matter? The investor-type framework excels at customization. Your neighbor might earn the same income but invest completely differently. This framework acknowledges that difference. The age-based framework excels at simplicity and stickability. People remember it, they reference it, it becomes actionable. Both frameworks have limits. The investor-type approach assumes your asset allocation stays relatively consistent and ignores sequence of returns risk. The danger of a major market crash right at retirement could do permanent damage. The age-based approach doesn't account for individual risk preferences or if you're saving less than 15% or starting later than 25. The biggest limitation of both, they can give false confidence. Hitting a specific number doesn't address whether you've planned your withdrawal strategy, optimized Social Security timing, or thought carefully about healthcare and tax efficiency in retirement. A single number is never the complete picture. What actually matters? Here's the truth. Retirement readiness isn't about one magic number. It's about understanding several things: how much you've accumulated, how that money is structured and invested, when you plan to stop working, and what other income sources you'll have. You have more control over this than most benchmarks suggest. Working 1 or 2 extra years gives you more time to save and means fewer years you need to fund. Delaying Social Security boosts your income floor. Adjusting your spending assumptions changes everything. These frameworks work best as reference points, not rigid mandates. Use them to check your progress. If you're significantly off track, dig into why. Are you saving too little? Is your portfolio misaligned with your timeline? Could you adjust your retirement age? The precision in detailed tables might be academically valuable, but it's not necessarily practical for everyday decision-making. Sometimes a simpler milestone approach works better. Sometimes understanding how your specific portfolio structure affects your needs makes more sense. The point is to understand that your retirement readiness depends on multiple factors, not just one number. You have levers you can pull. Knowledge about those levers matters far more than memorizing a single target. Stay informed. This is USA Tax.